Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating from our source text, spiritual environmental design. We're going to decode the architecture of the Western Pure Land, a realm deeply described in Buddhist literature, but we're looking at it through a really specific, almost architectural lens. We're exploring how this realm is essentially outlined as a perfectly engineered environment, one that is literally designed to hack human psychology and bypass our deepest flaws. It's an absolute masterclass in how environment dictates behavior, and I am so thrilled to unpack the whole shebang with you.
Okay, let's dive into this because the source text starts with a brilliant, super grounded dilemma. There's this old saying, a cow pulled to Beijing is still a cow. Basically, just changing your physical zip code doesn't magically change your fundamental nature. The text points out that, as ordinary people, we are heavy with stubborn habits and karmic baggage. So here's the central question. If we're so flawed, how could simply arriving in the Western Pure Land suddenly allow us to find perfect, unwavering peace? Why wouldn't we just drag all our messy, fluctuating human nature right in there with us? How does this realm actually change the cow? To answer that, the text breaks down the Pure Land's design into 5 specific mechanisms. 1. The ordinary person's dilemma. 2. Buddha and Dharma's power. 3. Sages and a painless realm. 4. Infinite life and non-retrogression. And finally, 5. The final choice. Starting right off with Section 1, the ordinary person's dilemma, or the inherent problem with our fluctuating minds. Moving straight into Section 2, Buddha and Dharma's power. This is where we see the first environmental solutions. The text identifies mechanism 1 as the Buddha's power. Now, you might be wondering, why is this necessary? Well, the author explains that we're living really far removed from the historical time of the Buddha. And because of that massive distance, both in time and in our own inherent wisdom, we just don't have those deep wisdom roots that allowed ancient practitioners to hear a single phrase and suddenly achieve enlightenment. We need constant direct support. In this engineered environment, the literal, constant presence of Amitabha Buddha provides ongoing blessings. Think of this continuous proximity as a giant external battery. It's constantly charging up the practitioner's resolve for enlightenment, their bodhicitta, so they don't have to somehow generate all that power on their own.
But interestingly, the support isn't just coming from the Buddha himself. The text quotes the Amitabha Sutra, which describes this incredibly dynamic environment. It says, "There are always various wonderful birds of different colors. Day and night, they sing with harmonious and elegant sounds." Think about that for a second. Day and night. The environment itself is alive, transmitting teachings 24/7. There is absolutely zero downtime here, not even for the birds.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the sentient environment is utilized as a teaching tool. The text specifically calls out these birds: white cranes, peacocks, parrots, saris, kalavinkas, and jivakas. But they aren't just there to look pretty. The crucial detail from the source is that the sound of these birds singing is actually preaching the Dharma. When beings in this land hear these songs, they are effortlessly, automatically brought right back to a state of mindfulness regarding the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The environment is quite literally doing the heavy lifting to keep their spiritual focus sharp. Which naturally brings us to mechanism 2, the Dharma's power within the non-sentient environment. See, it's not just the living creatures that are teaching you. The text explains that even inanimate objects are perfectly engineered for spiritual growth. When the wind blows through the jeweled trees and these decorative nets, it produces a sound like hundreds of thousands of musical instruments playing all at once. But here is the most fascinating part, at least according to the text. The sounds produced by this wind are automatically tailored to perfectly match the spiritual capacity and the exact specific needs of whoever happens to be listening. The environment just adapts to the learner, making sure the teachings are always exactly what they need to hear at that exact moment. All right, let's jump to Section 3, Sages and a Painless Realm. Think of this as the ultimate optimized social network. Mechanism 3 completely relies on who you surround yourself with. The text points back to the Amida Sutra, stating the goal is to gather in one place with such supreme good people. The author notes a pretty common saying: we rely on the masses. Our community fundamentally shapes who we are. Well, in this realm, absolutely every single person you interact with on a daily basis is a sage or a bodhisattva. You are entirely surrounded by the most supremely good, wise individuals imaginable. The text argues that having a peer group like this effortlessly generates a constant, inescapable field of positive energy. And then we have mechanism 4, The sutra plainly states sentient beings in that land have no suffering, but only enjoy all kinds of bliss. What's really fascinating here is the psychological implication the source draws from it. It argues that our sins and our bad habits are almost always triggered by negative conditions. Stress, pain, frustration, lacking something. If you design an environment that has absolutely zero suffering and is purely made up of joyful conditions, well, the psychological triggers for bad habits just can't happen. The negative seeds might technically still be there, but the environment completely deprives them of the soil and the water they'd need to actually grow.
On to Section 4, Infinite Life and Non-Retrogression, the ultimate resource.
To really grasp this, the text defines a major hurdle in our ordinary existence: fractional birth and death. Basically, this is the standard cycle of reincarnation, which is characterized by pretty short lifespans. The text uses a really stark, relatable example for this. Imagine you're a human man in a previous life. You naturally have the thoughts and worldview of a man. But if you die and are reborn as a woman, your physical form changes, and therefore your entire perspective fundamentally changes. Or if karma dictates you're reborn as a dog, well, you instantly have the thoughts of a dog. The physical body totally dictates the mindset. So every time you die, you lose all your spiritual momentum. It's essentially a constant, incredibly frustrating reset button.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Mechanism 5. On the left, we've got the mortal cycle we just talked about, fractional birth and death, where your progress is just constantly interrupted and wiped out. But on the right, we have the Pure Land solution, an infinite lifespan. The text states that beings here live for immeasurable and boundless asamkakya kalpas, which is just a fancy way of saying infinite time. Because there's no death, there is no physical reset, and without that physical reset, there is no psychological reset. This allows for continuous, unbroken, and exponential spiritual practice.
And the guaranteed outcome of having infinite, unbroken practice in a perfectly optimized environment is this concept right here of vivertika. The text defines this term as the state of non-retression. In plain English, it means you never, ever slide back or regress in your spiritual journey. The author really emphasizes that while non-retression might not be a huge deal for already advanced enlightened sages, for ordinary, fluctuating, easily distracted people like us, it's absolutely the most critical guarantee of the entire system.
Finally, Section 5, the final choice, where we put it all together.
So, the crucial point is how these 5 mechanisms actually work together as one complete, foolproof system. 1, you've got the direct divine presence strengthening your resolve. 2, a 24/7 immersive sensory environment, the birds, the wind, tailoring teachings specifically to you. 3, an exclusive social network of sages generating pure positive energy. 4, the total removal of all suffering, stripping away any triggers for bad behavior. And 5, infinite time to practice without ever facing that frustrating reset button of death and rebirth. The text presents this not as just a magical fairyland, but as a flawlessly logical, meticulously engineered ecosystem designed to absolutely guarantee the spiritual success of even the most flawed, ordinary individual. Which leads us right to the final thought presented by the source text. It methodically lays out how literally every single variable that causes human failure has been solved by this spiritual environmental design. It makes an incredibly compelling case that, for minds that constantly rise and fall depending on their surroundings, a perfect environment isn't just a nice-to-have, it's practically a requirement for success. And so, the text leaves us with one very direct, provocative question. Knowing that this perfectly engineered environment exists solely to solve all your human flaws, do you want to go? I hope this explainer gave you a crystal clear understanding of this fascinating text. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning the design of the environments around you.